tonight.
Yeah, sure thing, Wes.
And if you would, I know you had a very interesting encounter. I posted it to the blog. I know it's been the talk of the town. But if you would start from the very beginning, tell us what you were out doing, and tell us what you saw, tell us what you experienced.
Yeah, we were out fishing. It was a group of about 6 of us. We decided to drive out about 30 miles east of Charlotte, way out in the country, and where I think 27 crosses the Rocky River, and in Cabarrus County. We were in my 73 Caprice Classic, which, don't have bucket seats in the big car, so I think there were 6 of us all together. I didn't know most of the guys very well. I knew one of them real well, and most of the others were his friends. And so, anyway, we got out there, and to get down to the river, it's a real steep trek down a path. To get the banks on our side of the river. We parked on the east side of the road bridge of the overpass. It's a real steep trek to get down to the river. And so we went down that path and set up there and started fishing in the daytime. It's just one of the greatest places to catch catfish. And we really didn't plan a nighttime fishing trip. And that may be one of the biggest reasons why the Sasquatch hung around us as long as it did, which this encounter lasted for a couple of hours, because we didn't bring any flashlights with us, and that can be a big deterrent, as a lot of people know, the Sasquatches and shine lights and stuff. But anyway, it's one of my favorite fishing spots, and a lot of people set up under the bridge, but I set up kind of, I guess, north of the bridge a little bit, because I like to cast upstream, and the current's so swift, just kind of let the line catch on rocks and leave it out there until I get a fish on there. Otherwise, it get hung up. But anyway, it was probably not long after dark. I mean, it wasn't like good dark, just shortly after sunset, right in there. I saw this man, which I thought was a man up by the road, on the other side of the river. And it's like this extremely tall, like basketball tall man. And I was only thinking man back then because Bigfoot wasn't in my vocabulary. I should add, this is probably like mid-'80s. I was like in my very early 20s or so. It was a good while ago. And so he was kind of just looking down at us, and I had a full view of him. There was no obstructions between me and him. I could see him, but I was thinking it was a man, and I was just kind of wondering. I've never seen anybody on that side of the river, on that side before, because there was a lot of briars and stuff to get down toward the water and all, and people didn't really go on that side to fish. And so it was kind of milling around watching us, and it kind of walked up right up to the edge of the road, and there was a car coming, and I noticed when the lights hit it, it kind of lit it up. And I was looking at it, I saw he looked really weird. It looked like he was wearing a coat that was in tatters, and I guess really what I was seeing was a bunch of matted hair. But I was trying to, reason out in my mind as being a man, because I wasn't, like I said, Bigfoot wasn't in my vocabulary back then. But when the car lights lit it up, it kind of looked toward the car that was coming, and then quickly stepped down this little steep embankment and stood below the road. And the car, I noticed, it slowed down, and I think I remember it came to a little bit of a stop for a minute, and I thought, well, is this somebody picking this guy up? And then the car went on, but the Sasquatch was still up there, and then about around that time I caught a fish. I reeled my fish in, and I kind of held it up kind of high for this person, because I noticed he's kind of like watching us. I mean, I was trying to not act like I couldn't see him watching. I just wasn't trying to stare at him, and I kind of don't think any of the others were really noticing him at all, actually. I kind of held it up high, and the fish was flipping its tail and all. And then right after that, he kind of walked down the hill in our direction and down to a little flat area. And and squatted down behind this bush with his head sticking up. And he stayed there maybe at least 30 minutes. But I noticed him kind of, whenever I would look back over there, I could see his head just watching us. And maybe he just didn't realize, because I was trying not to, I guess, to show a social courtesy or whatever. I was trying not to, stare at him or anything. I was trying to, just go about my business. But, I thought it was kind of odd. And at one point, I couldn't see him anymore. And I asked this guy next to me, I said, there was fishing beside me, the one that I knew really well. I said, I wonder where that guy was. He said, what guy? He hadn't really noticed him. And I said, well, he was right over there. And I started pointing toward the bushes, and he was still there. And when I was pointing at him, he stood up and then walked into the woods and kind of walked out of view. And so he understood what the pointing of my finger was, actually.
Let me ask you, Nobby, so you see this guy, and it's kind of odd behavior for him to walk down, get underneath, sit behind a bush, and then you're pointing at him. What's going through your mind at this point? You're pointing at him, telling your buddy he's over there, and the thing gets up and walks off. Were you thinking it's still a person at this point, or what's going through your mind?
Yeah, I was more thinking of a person. I'd really, like I said, Bigfoot was not part of my vocabulary. I really didn't think much about Bigfoot back then. And this was my introduction to Bigfoot for the most part. I mean, I was aware of the Patterson-Gimlin and that kind of thing, but this was kind of a new introduction. And I should kind of add that it looked like, when I was looking at him before, it looked like he was wearing a coat and a hood, which this was summertime, and so I thought, this is an odd looking fellow, and he's kind of really, really tall, and looked like he was bulked up at top, which I thought that was, he was wearing like a heavy coat of some kind, and actually looked really odd when he started walking down the hill in our direction. I guess he maybe was looking down toward his feet, but he almost looked headless. It was like it just made a bump on top, which was kind of freaky looking. I remember that, but what was I thinking? I just thought he was it was just some really odd man, really, really tall man, and I was kind of wondering what is he doing over there, but he was watching us, and that was clear. So.
What happens next?
Well, I don't know how long afterwards. We were fishing for a while, and we were all catching fish. This is a really, really great spot for catching catfish. And evidently he must have went up and crossed over the road and came down on the other side of the bridge, down right next to the water, and started making a succession of screams. It was like some of what you've heard on some tapes where they make the screams just over and over and over. It was a really loud scream. It was really, much louder than any human could scream that loud or make that loud of a scream. It's the same as you hear in the I guess that's Puyallup, or how do you say Washington? How do you say that town?
Yeah, Puyallup.
Puyallup, yeah. Those recordings where they record the screams in succession, it made that sound. Just where it was doing it, continuous over and over. It would do a long scream, then do another long scream. Kind of like it was a very high pitched screeching kind of a noise. And so it was doing it on the other side of the water there. I couldn't see it when it was doing that. And then it quit. And then it was doing it on our side of the river, to our south. And so it crossed that river, which that river is really swift. We're actually just above rapids there. And really the only way I fish this river is I cast upstream and let my line catch on the rocks, because that water is so swift there that sometimes it just bring the line over the bank. And it's real rocky too. And, I couldn't imagine a person walking across that in the dark. I had built a big fire right on the bank, right on the rocks right there at the edge of the water. And so we had that fire going to give us some light. But like I said, we didn't have flashlights, so we couldn't direct flashlights over toward it. But it would go silent for a while, and maybe about 20 minutes later it would pick back up and start making its screams, and sometimes like shaking bushes and things, but it make these screams in succession, and it occasionally would, like, lob rocks. Sometimes they'd land in the water, sometimes in the brush behind us. It would just kind of like arc a rock or, over, and they'd kind of like come dropping straight down.
When you first started hearing the screams, at any point were you thinking, I'm out of here? I'm not, I have no idea what's going on here, but I'm out of here.
Well, it was kind of unnerving, but, it was, for some reason, we didn't get unhinged, none of us. I mean, we're a group of, like, I think we were 5 or 6 people. I think we were 6, young men, and it was really odd, but I guess, there's security in numbers, and we were all, right there fishing, and we continued our fishing. Now, we did talk about it, and after I started making the screams, someone brought up that it might be Nobby, and which Nobby is kind of a local North Carolina name for a Bigfoot that I think it started in 1979. I had a whole bunch of encounters up around Carpenter's Knob, North Carolina, and it got a nickname called Nobby. But even still today, when Bigfoot sightings happen, if the news reports it, they talk about how Nobby's returned again. But we were talking about maybe that's Nobby, and so that's when we got the inclination, maybe this is a Bigfoot. And the point that it was actually throwing things, it wasn't just some other kind of animal, because, bobcats and other critters don't throw rocks, And so it was making these, and the screams it was making, I almost thought was this is some man pranking us. And I started thinking, because no human can make a vocalization that loud, that it would have to be some kind of a loudspeaker, really, because it was just so booming loud that no person could be making that scream. Anyway, at one point, when it was making the noise directly up behind us, it made some screams, and, it was occasionally throwing a rock. I decided to throw rocks back. And so I started throwing rocks, and I used to come to that river a lot and fish, and they have these great throwing rocks all over the banks. Just they're flat on 2 sides. And I used to like to, sidearm them and sling them, try to skip it on the water. About every time I went down there, I did that some. But I could really zing rocks back in, and I started throwing rocks, trying to zing rocks at it. And I guess I wasn't really scared of it at that point. I just, like I probably should have been. But and I heard it crashing as it kind of ran to my left. And I guess to avoid my rocks, and I heard it crashing in the vegetation, and I continued throwing some, and then I stood there, holding rocks, and I'd hear this bush shake, and I'd throw a rock at it, and I'd wait, a little bit, and I'd hear this. He kept doing it over and over. It's the same little bush. And Wes, you would have done the same thing. You would have figured out as like anybody else. He's kind of, making a trick target for me, because it was that same bush would make a little shake, and then I would throw at it. And I figured, well, he must be leaning over and just keep shaking that little bush like that for me to throw at. And so I decided to throw one, well to the left, because he'd been moving to my left already. And I threw one real hard, and that first throw I hit him. And I know I hit him because he let out this long ruckus, and it was kind of like the samurai chatter, somewhat like Ron Moorhead recorded. It sounded like a chimp temper tantrum, really. It was just it wasn't the screams. It was, up and down tones. It was more like he was cussing me out, really. pain and anger all mixed together. And I think in Ron Moorhead's recording, they thought it was with that chatter they did. There was two of them arguing with each other, making that chatter like an angry language anyway. But this kept going on for so long. I mean, it's like, he might have just kept making that solid for about maybe a good half a minute or so. And I started actually feeling sorry. I started to, get kind of a little twinge in my stomach. I started feeling bad. I really hurt him, And fortunately, I was facing that direction when I saw this rock coming right at my head. I barely ducked. It zinged, heard it whiz right past my left ear. I barely kind of ducked and to the side, and this rock, it was a line drive too. There was no arch on it at all. It was a good size rock. It's probably like 1.5 inches wide and maybe 3 or 4 inches long. It wasn't a small rock, and it was he evidently threw it overhand because it was tumbling vertical, And so I moved away from the riverbank to get behind some bushes. The bushes about as close to my height.
People at this point probably think you're insane, but I kind of get where you're at. It's curiosity is killing the cat at this point, isn't it? Your curiosity really is killing the cat at this point. You're just curious on what the hell is going on.
Well, I didn't realize what I was dealing with. Like I said, I didn't know too much of anything about Bigfoot. I just thought, well, this is some kind of an animal, and I'm a superior human, or I don't know. I thought it was some kind of an animal kind of thing, and I didn't really realize that. And I kind of figured out as the thing went on, this thing has some intelligence and some, and I didn't anticipate its resolve too. But under the bridge, I should mention, is the trees have been cut down, but in subsequent years, these small trees have grown up, and a lot of heavy, you call it undergrowth or overgrowth, whatever. A lot of bushes and things have grown up real thick. And it kind of helped him to kind of move around and stay hidden too. Plus, under the overpass itself it's pretty dark under there, really. Except we had that campfire on the shore.
When you're out there and you're throwing rocks back at this thing, you're out there with a bunch of buddies. Some guys you know, some guys you don't know. What's the conversation like?
It's been so many years that I don't remember. I remember we discussed it some, and some of the guys weren't fishing right next. Some of the guys I didn't discuss it with at all. There was mainly probably two others. The one that I knew really well, and another guy, and I did know these guys, but not well. They were younger than us. The conversations, I don't know. Well, there was a group of people fishing next to us that left early when that thing was screaming too, and I remember the consensus with that was, well, they're scared. They're leaving because they're scared. But
I can imagine.
But I remember. I can't remember what was discussed because that was so long ago. But I remember we talked about it being a novel. Maybe it was Bigfoot and that kind of a thing. So that did come up, and that was my first inclination that it might be that when someone else brought it up.
No, I understand, and I didn't mean to cut you off. So what happens next?
Okay, so anyway, I had to move closer away from the bank after it threw a rock and almost hit me in the head. And so I got behind. There was kind of a row of bushes there that were kind of thick, and so I was standing behind them. And we were pretty close to each other at that point because I had to move away from the river bank, and he'd already he wasn't that far away. I'd say he was probably about 35 feet away at that point. And because I think he moved down a little closer. And so I was trying to throw rocks back at him, but every time I try to pop up, he threw one so quick that I just barely ducked into things. I was kind of all I could do was make some wild overhand throws without even looking, over the bush to try to throw back. Because whenever I try to pop my head up to throw, he would release one real quick. And so I kind of, thought, well, I'll pop my head up and get him to throw, and then I'll duck under that and throw right on his trajectory on the premise that, well, he won't have time to be ready to throw another rock and I can get one off. So I started doing that, and I think the very first time I did that, I hit him because I popped up and he threw, and I ducked under that rock and immediately threw right on that same trajectory as his rock was, and he made another ruckus like he did before. It wasn't as long, but he made a kind of a chewing me out cussing ruckus. I'm pretty sure I must have hit him again. I don't know if I hit him any other times, but I'm assuming that I may have during the duel. But we did this some, and I was doing that several times on that same trajectory where he was trying to, where I would duck under, I would stick my head up, make him throw, and I would throw immediately on his trajectory. And so he moved away. He kind of figured that out, and that kind of a little bit speaks to his intelligence. He moved further up like he'd been before and got some distance between us. Really gave me more time to do too. But I wouldn't throw unless he threw. And so I don't know how long this went on. At one time I smelled an odor too, a really strong pungent odor. It was like something dead and rotten eggs and urine and feces all mixed together. I don't know what it was. It was horrible. It was short-lived though. It didn't last very long, but it was really overpowering smell. And it could be kind of stress-induced things like they have with gorillas that release auxiliary man. But anyway, I won't get into that. But anyway, he moved further away, and kind of like it was up before, like in the area where he's like shaking the bush, up in that, moved further up. And I continued to do that. I'd wait for him to throw, and I would duck under. But at one point, there was a thin place in the bushes where I squatted down. He snuck one through there and hit me. See, this is a really protracted, long little encounter I had, with. It went on for a while. At one point, I don't remember at which point, I yelled to the other guy, says, he's throwing rocks at us. And one of the guys threw a rock back, and he threw one that landed like 3 inches from the guy's foot. And it hit right next to his foot. These rocks slipped up, and he didn't throw another rock after that. He heeded the warning, and it really shows the accuracy. I don't think this Sasquatch threw one rock that wasn't dead accurate or where he meant to throw it to. I mean, they're athletes, but the others just stayed clear of me. They just stayed away from me. Doing this, they didn't. Anyway, after I'd had my back to the fire for a little while, kind of doing this, my eyes adjusted to the dark a little better, and I started picking up glimpses of him where I could see him. What he was doing was, when he threw, he would like stand up and throw over this kind of taller bush area, but he would throw, and then he would step to his right and squat behind the bush. And I kind of picked up the movement of what he was doing. And so I started timing my throws accordingly on how I saw him moving. And I even started timing to where I knew he would move next. Before he moved back, I would throw in that direction. And I was, at that, as a further away, I probably wouldn't hurt him as bad to hit him, especially if I hit him in the body. But I'm assuming I probably hit him doing that because I actually picked up a bunch of rocks and was throwing in succession the way I knew he would be moving, and then he quit throwing rocks at me. And so he quit returning. I think he recognized it was a losing venture. And I actually stood up, was waving my left arm in the air, taunting him, and he wouldn't throw. And so he quit throwing, and I kind of waited around a little bit. He didn't throw any more rocks, and so I ended up moving down toward the back to where I was fishing. I thought maybe it was over with. I don't know. And I was facing the river and had my back, toward that area where he was, and then a rock hit me in my upper back, just below my neck, just left of my spine, and it impacted real hard. And actually, he might have bruised or even broke ribs. I had pain with that for a long time afterwards. I at least had bruised ribs. I don't know, but it was a pretty hard impact, and then when that happened, I began to bend over, which is fortunate because the next rock hit me in the back of the head, and really that's what he'd been doing that whole time. He'd been head hunting, and I believe I must have hit him in the head early in the little rock duel that we had, and that's why he that was the money shot he was going for. So, but fortunately, I just started to bend over and didn't hit me square in the head. He was kind of, I didn't realize that he'd moved to a new location, actually about 2:00, and really behind me, and so it was the rock came in an angle. When I bent over, it kind of hit across the back of my head. It didn't hit square in. So, but anyway, it still cut my head, and probably like thumping a cantaloupe. But I bent over and I put my hand on the back of my head and I let out this long scream. And part of it was, it hurt. It hurt. That rock hit me in the back of the head. It really hurt. But the other part was I was just angry. I was just mad at this thing, And I let a long scream, and I think the guy beside me, my good friend there, he actually got on me about that scream. I think it unnerved him because it's such a long, loud scream, and I was so angry. The idiom is I just wanted to kill him, and I actually turned and took off running to run up the path like I was going to go after the thing. I know that sounds stupid to me right now and unreasonable, but that's what I did. I just took off charging at the thing. And a lot of people don't quite understand that, but I don't either actually. But I did. I just wanted to kill the thing. I just so mad.
I can understand that. I mean, if you're pissed and it hits you in the back of the head with a rock, I get it. I'd be pissed too. I'd probably go after it too. In the heat of the moment, it's funny. We do things in the heat of the moment, and we look back afterwards and we think, "My God, I can't believe I did that." But in the heat of the moment, a lot of people will react that way. So you go chasing after this thing, and what happened?
Well, yeah, I think it might have been the intimidation factor too. This just long intimidation of this thing that wouldn't leave me alone. I just so angry. Anyway, I took off running. I ran over to where the path was, and I was starting to run up the path. And I looked, and he was actually standing in the path, and I was running dead at him. He was in the path, and then it started kind of hitting me. What am I going to do? I get to him, but he took off running parallel to me, or perpendicular, I guess. Excuse me, not parallel. He to my left, I guess his right. He took off running. He ran straight through bushes. He didn't run around anything. I went back there the next day and looked. I could see where he ran. He broke right through, broke branches. I couldn't have run through those bushes like that. He ran straight through them, and I could see his whole silhouette, his whole dark silhouette, and he was huge. I mean, his upper body, from us looking sideways, was huge. He was bent well far forward when he ran. I could see his big legs churning, and he ran. And then kind of stopped out of my view, and I continued, slow to a trot and up the path I was running up. And I came and I stood at the place where he'd run into the vegetation, and I kind of looked that way, and I couldn't see him. And I bent over and picked a rock up. And when I did that, he put out a low growl, and I realized it was a really bad situation. I couldn't have seen a rock coming at me if he had thrown it, and it's probably only like 20 feet away, too. It was really close. And I threw the rock down as kind of a peace gesture. I just threw it down. And then, well, I won't tell this part because I did get one of the guys to come join me. I called my friend, and I had to talk him into, come on up here, man. I didn't want to be up there by myself anyway, but I won't get into that because I can't really remember what all happened with that. But anyway, he lobbed a rock and over my head, and it hit like a bush, like maybe 2.5 feet behind me. I think he did that to distract me, but like I said, his rock tone was uncannily accurate. He had to have launched it straight up in the air, and it comes arc real high to come down and land just behind me like that, to throw a rock over me from that close in. Anyway, I kind of wonder if he did that to make me look around while he moved away or something. I don't know. But that was that. But anyway, I mean, a lot of this shows that he has a lot of intelligence. And just, I don't know if you ever heard this, that the Native American tales of they would play tricks on people and that kind of thing. And when he was doing that shaking the bush to make me throw at it, it's kind of like playing a game with me almost.
I have heard that before, actually, from a few witnesses. I had a witness, he didn't come on the show, but him and I talked, and he said that it was kind of the same situation, Nobby. He was throwing rocks. They were throwing rocks back and forth at each other. He said the Sasquatch would reach over, grab a brush, and start shaking it. And he assumed, he didn't, obviously we don't know, but he assumed that it was wanting him to throw rocks at the brush, even though the Sasquatch wasn't in the brush. It was a real weird story.
Oh, really? That's interesting. I've never heard that.
Yeah, it was
anything like that.
Yeah, it was a very interesting encounter. He gave a pretty good description of what he saw. It actually happened in Kentucky, is where it happened. And he said it was about the size of a gorilla, and it would shake the brush and almost kind of like throw your rock here, and they were throwing rocks back and forth at each other. It was kind of like your encounter, but it was a little bit, it was more during the daytime. He could see it. It was just odd. It was a real odd encounter.
Well, did this person get hit by a rock, or was he actually trying to hit the guy with a rock, or were they just trying to throw them near each other?
He said he never got hit with a rock. He came close a few times, but he was trying to hit it with a rock, and they were just throwing rocks back and forth. And I asked him, I said, well, didn't it ever cross your mind to leave? And he said, well, yes, but it was curiosity. He was so curious, and I get that. I mean, I understand what he's saying. He was so curious at the time of what the hell this thing was that he started throwing rocks back at it. And it really wasn't aggressive in the sense of attacking him, and he had no intentions on shooting it. And it was just a weird encounter. Like, they were throwing rocks back and forth at each other. And then finally he left. He was like, well, I had enough of that. And he left. He never got hit by a rock. He actually tried hitting it with a rock. But I think he told me he wasn't sure if he actually hit it or not.
Yeah, my feeling is if the Sasquatch would want to hit him with a rock, it could have beamed him good. The one I was dealing with, I don't think he ever had one misplaced shot. I think he hit exactly where he wanted to throw it every time, even when he hit right next to that guy's foot, like 3 inches from the guy's foot. I saw the rock flip in the air when that one hit the rocks there, and that was just a well-aimed shot. Everything he threw was just well-aimed.
Did you ever get a good look at this thing? Did you ever get a good look at its face? Did you ever get a good look at it?
I never got a good look at facial features. It was always in the dark. It was mostly what I saw was, when I saw him at a distance across the river, I could see his entire body. I mean, it's unobstructed, but that was at a distance. And when I was close to him at times, I saw him, which is we hadn't got to that yet. But it was so dark, I really couldn't make out features as far as facial features. I can't really describe facial features. I could describe kind of like forms and those kinds of things. Just had a huge head on him, I know that. But I can't really describe particular features, except when I saw his hand really well. I could, which looked a lot like a human hand, really. But anyway, talking about the Sasquatch intelligence, him shaking the bush to make me throw at it. But, when we were throwing really close to each other, I mean, he realized that was a bad proposition, so he moved away and got some distance between us to where I couldn't, where I guess he could avoid my rocks easier when I was trying to throw on his trajectory, making him throw, and I throw him in his trajectory. And even when he was doing the little deal where he would throw and then move and squat behind the bush, going backwards and forth, I mean, that, I feel like I was dealing with another person, the way, his strategizing and doing things. And even there, when he figured out it was a losing proposition, he just quit. You know, I mean, to his credit. And I mean, I was kind of outsmarting him so far. You know, in the contest was having him with him, but then, you know, his persistence won the day because he moved to a whole new position. He went down the path, which he wasn't near the path before when he was going at me. And he came down, and if I'd have tried to hide behind the bushes from that vantage point where he moved to, I couldn't have hid behind those bushes so well. I mean, I think he might have figured that out. He's going to move to a place and get a good vantage point. And but you know, when that first rock that hit me in the back, if I had ducked so many of those before, he was throwing through the top of the bushes to compensate for my ducking. I had to duck even further, I mean, that's intelligent too, to do that, to try to cut it through the top in anticipation I was going to duck. But when he hit me in the back, that would actually lined up score of my head if I would have ducked. And that's kind of not too bright because I had my back turned to him. But he almost, that first rock he threw and hit me in the back with a line straight up in my head if I had a ducked. So he may have been and threw that in anticipation of me ducking, but I didn't duck. And the next one he just aimed at my head, and it was almost fortunate I had just got hit in the back, and I just started to lean forward, and that rock didn't hit. That rock would have hit me square in the head. You know, I might have had a brain injury actually if he'd have nailed me just dead on with a rock in the head like that. But fortunately, it was more of a glancing strike, but it was still a good strike. But I just wanted to make these comments. These things are smart. You know, he was strategizing with me doing this rock tool, and when things weren't working, he would develop new little strategies. He would change. Like I said, when we was throwing at him, he started throwing rocks through the tops of the bushes where it was still light enough to get through. And so I was having to duck. And he was doing that in anticipation that I was going to duck. So, you know, he was thinking ahead.
When you heard it growl, what was going through your mind?
That growl was scary. Gosh, it was very low. It sounded like some kind of a dog or something. I don't know. It sounded like an animal growl. You know, what was going through my mind? I was thinking, gosh. Well, he's giving me a warning. I knew that, so I interpreted that as I was receiving a warning. You know, something bad going to happen if I threw that rock at him. So, and I threw the rock back down. I heeded the warning when I heard that growl, but he was only like 20 feet away from me too. So what happens next? Okay, well, we finally decided to leave. I don't know how much longer after this. I can't, this was a long time ago, but I don't think that he continued any kind of screams or rock throwing after this. I think he just stayed silent. And there's such heavy growth, I'm sure at times he snuck probably right down to where we were and was probably, just right there at us at times probably. But I think he kind of quit his antics of screaming and stuff. As far as I can remember, I mean, it could have happened. It was so long ago, I don't know. But anyway, when we started to leave, we had to travel up that path. I had my stringer, I tied it to a branch that was near the water, a little plant, and so I untied my stringer, and I had my tackle box and my 2 fishing poles, and so I actually led the way out of there up the path. And the path, like I said, it kind of levels out at the bottom, but then it starts to turn. It's a pretty steep hill to take that path up. And as it was going up, it started to screaming, and but it was coming in from behind us, so it had evidently been right there down next to us before we left. And like I said, I think the whole thing of it actually wanted some fish, really. I think that's why it was hanging out with us so long, and it was interested in the fish that we were catching. And but anyway, I had the stringer of fish, and I actually led the way up the hill. But at one point, we come to it's like a retaining wall. It's part of the supports for the bridge. It was a concrete wall. It was about chest high, so you have to climb up over that. And and I was, I had my hands full, had my stringer and my tackle box and poles, and I actually had my upper part of my body over on top of the block, climbing up there, and the people, no one had ever panicked before, really. But that thing, it came so close, it was shaking the bushes and screaming. The guys that were taking up the rear took off running, and they hit, and it was like a big blam. Everybody hit that retaining wall, and it was a big free-for-all. They got all frenzied, and they were crawling over the wall, and they were using me as a handhold. People were going over top of me, and actually ended up pulling me backwards off the wall, with him, climbing up over me to cause this thing was scaring them. And then all of a sudden I ended up last as they were headed up the path, and I was off the wall. I was on that side. There was kind of like a little flat area just before that you could stand on right there at the wall. And I had my back, while I was facing the wall, I had my back to it, but it came up right behind me. I mean, it must have been just a few feet away, or 3 feet or something. And it screamed, it shook the bushes, and, it was right behind my head. And so, that scared the crap out of me. I moved down the block to get away from it, but as I moved down, that retaining wall gets higher. It's actually too high to climb up over. It gets, above my head. When I moved down it. But it was like shaking the trees and screaming, making those screams, which were really loud, right there close to me. Can't remember, like I said, it was a long time ago. I can't remember all that happened, but at one point I tried to communicate with it and talk to it, and what I did is I grabbed the back of my head and I bent over and I was saying, that hurt, I was telling him, I was trying to talk to him, say, that really hurt and stuff like that. And I was kind of bending over and holding the back of my head like when he hit me with a rock. And he went silent. He quit making his noise. And I thought, and I kind of interpreted that was, well, he's having some compassion for me or something,
That's really interesting. That's really, really interesting that you tried to communicate with it. So it stopped screaming at that point. It stopped causing the ruckus.
Yeah. He went silent, but then he did start back up again with his screaming and shaking. He was trying to, scare me, and I think the whole point was the stringer of fish. Really, he was really interested in the fish, because at one point, at another point, I was thinking of trying to climb over that block, that higher part of the block, and I set the fish up on the block, and he went silent. He just went quiet. And I think it's because he saw those fish, and I thought I was going to give him one. And, I really should have gave him some fish. I didn't. And I was kind of, like I say, I just claimed young and stupid. I just, it was everybody's fish on the stringer and not just mine. And I should have thrown him a fish. It might have alleviated the whole thing. I don't know. But anyway. But and then I took the stringer down. But anyway, we started in with the screaming some more, and so I did the same thing again. I held the back of my head and I bent over. I tried to do a repeat performance and say, that really hurt. And then he started chewing me out in that samurai chatter stuff. It was like just like when I'd hit him before, and he started kind of like cursing me, which that's what I interpreted. He was kind of cursed me out. And I took the assumption that he was communicating, I hit him first. And I almost think I'd hit him in the head, because he was headhunting, and he didn't really stop till he got a headshot, really. And when he got the headshot, it's when he finally gave up. I think he needed revenge and I think it may have been I hit him in the head to start with or something. That's my guess. Because he was headhunting the whole time. But anyway, so he started kind of like chewing me out in his squatchies. I guess that's what I kind of dubbed their language and their squatchies. And this was the samurai chatter type, and it sounded like temper tantrum or something. And so I tried to communicate with him some more by doing charades, and I wanted to try to tell him I was sorry for hitting him with a rock. And so I did a throwing motion with my arm, but I was facing him when I did it. And he thought I was throwing a rock at him because I heard the bushes start crashing when he was trying to move away. And then he started throwing rocks, and he was zinging. He wasn't trying to hit me. He was like zinging them over my head. I could hear him cutting through the bushes. And he was throwing them like a whole bunch of, he was throwing rocks again. And so but he wasn't throwing them and hitting me. But I did, like I say, I'm young and stupid. I bent over and I picked up a rock. And when I did that, he started throwing rocks like maybe about a foot or so from me into that concrete retaining wall. And I remember seeing one that hit the retaining wall and busted apart. I mean, he was throwing rocks hard, and I thought he was going to pop me in the face or the head. And so I put my arm up and I bent, at the elbow to cover my head and face, and I was weaving, in case it hit me there. And I started yelling. I was really frantic at that point. I started yelling, cut it out, over and over. And then he stopped. And he was silent. And I heard a single word, and it's more like recordings. If you want to play a recording of like a single, when they have more human speech, it sounded like it was really like a 2-syllable word or something. It sounded like it was very low tone, very calm, and it was like just he spoke some kind of a word, and that I didn't recognize, of course, but it was kind of like telling me, okay, huh?
What did it sound like? Can you?
I don't remember what the word sounded like. I just remember it was a word. It was like a human-sounding word. It was like I was hearing some man standing there say a word. Like it sounded like normal human speech, which sometimes they do that. As some people say, it sounds like an Indian dialect or something. But in that instance, I think he really actually was showing compassion for me, or telling me it's okay, and it's kind of a unique experience. That I was afforded kind of some one-on-one time and with a Sasquatch, and it was kind of because I kind of got stuck at the block. I was scared to turn my back to him because when I did, he'd come real close. And I was been calling up to the guys trying to get them to come down and watch my back and take my stuff because I had all that gear, and that's kind of why I was stuck at that retaining wall. It was like I was too scared to turn my back to it to climb over, and because whenever I did, it'd really come close and scream and stuff, and so I was just kind of scared, and those guys wouldn't come back down. They went up all the way to the top and wouldn't come back, which that's kind of not good. But anyway, and he had gone quiet at that point too. I mean, most of the time I was at the retaining wall, he was like screaming and shaking stuff, and really intimidating, really intimidating. At one point, I can't remember at what point when I was at the retaining wall when he wasn't making the screams, I saw him. He actually had stepped over. I don't know if it's when I put the fish on the wall or what, but he'd stepped over on the same level as I was on the hill. And he was standing, and I just happened to recognize his dark silhouette. And he was so tall. He looked like he was the height of a basketball goal. And he was probably, like 10 or 12 feet away from me. And I was already scared, but I distinctly remember a strong sensation of fear hit me because this thing was so big, and it's so tall, and I felt like an ant. I felt like this thing could just crush me, and but then I think he could tell that I was looking at him, so I was looking up, at him, and he kind of just slowly turned and walked. Went down the hill, had tilted his head forward and went down the hill, and then I lost view of him. But that was the first time I saw him while I was up there at the concrete wall. I finally decided, he was, doing that shaking the bushes and stuff and screaming again. I decided that I was going to walk down that where I could climb over a retaining wall and go ahead and do it anyway. And when I walked toward that, which that's more where he was shaking stuff, he went quiet. And he quit making the noise, I guess, because I approached him. I was walking right toward him, and I kind of stuck my head over trying to look into the bushes to see him because, I've still been wanting to really get a better look at this thing. And when I did that, I heard the vegetation, kind of crashing as he moved away. It probably moved away about 8 feet or so. I think he was actually real close when I stuck my head in. But he moved away and then growled again. He did that growl like he did before. And so I turned, and I was going to, go ahead and try to climb over that retaining wall. I felt a little tug on the stringer of fish, and I looked down, and I saw his hand. His hand was like maybe 4 inches from my knee. His hand was in the shadows. He actually froze his hand when I looked down. He froze it in place, and his hand was completely in the shadows, but the ground was lit underneath, and so I could see a really distinct silhouette of the hand, except I couldn't see all the way to the end of the fingers, but it looked like I was looking at my own right hand. It was his right hand, and I could see the thumb, the opposable thumb, and on the hand, and it looked like just a human hand that you'd look down from the top, looking down, on the thumb side up, And so I started looking at the arm, and the arm, I started kind of like turning, looking at the arm, and the arm from the hand to the elbow was as long as my entire arm. I mean, it was, I don't know how long that is, 3 feet or so, I don't know. It was long, and till it got to the elbow, and probably altogether his arm was probably over 5 feet long. I don't know. It was just a really long arm. And I don't know if I got distracted or something, but somehow it vanished. I couldn't see it anymore. I don't know if he threw something with his other hand or something, and I'm suddenly glanced away or what happened. But then it was gone. I was looking. I was kind of befuddled. Where did it go? And in front of me was this hole in the vegetation, and I could see this dark area. And so I was going to, just stick my head in there again and take another look. And I stepped forward, and I was leaning over. I was bending over to look in this hole, but it wasn't a hole. It was him. And I was actually just about to make contact with his face. And my face probably came within 2 feet of his, and then suddenly he sprang back. And that's when I realized it was him. He sprang back, really hard and fast, just like up in the air. And that's when I could see his head was so much bigger than mine. It was like really long, huge head, and so his big shoulders and all. But so I almost stuck my face on him, and that would have been a trip if I'd have done something like anyway. And then right after that, I turned around and I climbed over the retaining wall and got up the hill. And so I got up there and talked to those guys and told them how I was, why didn't you come down and stuff. And they said that they were thinking of trying to flag a car down, to get them to call law enforcement. This was long before cell phones and all. So that's kind of the main story that I had. When we drove away, I actually saw him in the rearview mirror. I saw him coming up, emerging, and I kind of yelled, "There he is!" And the guy, I didn't say in the rearview mirror, and the other people on the scene were just looking for him, but I hit my brakes, and then he went straight back down. I think I was still or just across the bridge, or still on the bridge. I saw him in my rearview. He was actually coming up, I guess, to look around where we'd been. And the other guys they were mad at me because they didn't realize I was talking about in the rearview mirror. They were looking ahead, but anyway, that's my encounter, Wes.
No, it's a great encounter, and I really do appreciate you sharing. I wanted to ask you, when you saw its hand, did it actually get a fish? I know it was reaching for the fish, but did it actually grab one?
No, he didn't take one. I don't believe I just felt a little light tug. of course I had the stringer run through the gill and the mouth and all. I mean, to get that off of there, he'd really had to just tear the thing apart. But I just felt a really light tug, and I think that's what caused me to look down. I felt something because the stringer was wrapped around my hand, and so no, he didn't ever get a fish. I really feel bad to this day. He worked hard for a fish, and I kind of feel dumb that I didn't give him a fish. That's one of those things. Anyway, I went back the very next day, and so I, to kind of look around, I couldn't find any footprints. I kind of looked to see if I could find some, and it's very rocky there, and I didn't see any footprints. And I did see where he ran through the bushes. When I ran up the trail, I could see broken branches where he'd run through these thick bushes, where they were, the branches were still hanging on by the fibers where he'd run through it. And I crossed over the bridge because I was curious on how tall he was, because I wanted to when I first seen the thing, I thought it was a man. He was standing up. He was standing up actually on the edge of the road at one time. He kind of went up that little hill looking down at us. And then he stepped down. I was going to trying to remember about where his head was on that embankment that he walked down, about how high that was and how I matched up to it. So I crossed over the bridge and went down there. I was standing there, and my first assessment when I was looking at that, trying to gauge how much higher he was than me, that I put him in the 9-foot range, but then and I found that too incredible, and I was almost thinking it was even over 9 feet, but it was already so unbelievable, and I tried to be a real conservative estimate. So I'd tell people it was around 7.5 to 8 feet tall. It's just because it's already an unbelievable story, so I just revised it to a conservative estimate. But I think he was, especially when I saw him when I was at a retaining wall, the height, the sheer height of that thing standing up there when I was there. He was really tall.
I definitely understand that. Sometimes when we're in those moments, it's, you see something, even in my own encounter, I thought, God, that thing's 12 feet tall. Well, it wasn't quite 12 feet tall. It's more like 9.5, 10 feet tall. But, in those moments, you're just so in shock over what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. And it's not that crazy of an encounter, to be honest with you, Nobby. I mean, it's really not. It reminded me of Bob Garrett telling his encounter about how that he was throwing rocks back and forth at the Sasquatch. He'd pick up a rock, it'd pick up a rock. He'd throw it at it, it'd throw it back at him. And eventually he picked up a rock and dropped it, and it dropped its rock. And it's just,
oh, wow.
It's not, I think sometimes these things think more with their stomach than they, in that situation. I tend to agree with you. It's almost like it wanted the fish that you had, and it was kind of throwing a tantrum, wanting the fish.
I think that was the whole purpose. It was hanging around us. When I caught that one fish, he was watching us, and I held my pole up really high, and the fish was flipping his tail, and it was right after that he walked down the hill toward us, and then squatted down behind there's like this briars and stuff going there. He kind of squatted behind that stuff, and watched us for a long time. I think he was really interested in the fish. Maybe Sasquatches sometimes scare animals away from food and scavenge it or something. I don't know what his plans were really, but I think the main thing with him is he was interested in the fish that we had.
I tend to agree with you. I've talked to hunters before that have shot deer, know nothing about Sasquatch, and they'll tell me, well, a gorilla came and took the deer away. And, we don't have gorillas here in Washington State. And I'll be like, what do you mean a gorilla? But it's interesting, like the Sasquatch really wanted nothing to do with the hunter. It just wanted the food that the hunter had is really what it wanted. And it kind of sounds like the same thing in the situation you're in. You were more of a pain in the butt for the Sasquatch. It really just wanted the fish. It really didn't want it. You were just kind of an obstacle for it. It wanted the fish, which is interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, they kind of play games in a way to a degree. I don't know. See, and what you're talking with Garrett with the throwing the rock down. That's kind of playing the game. Yeah, they kind of steal. I believe they do steal people's catches. I think Mark Zatsky talked about them following around these guys who are shooting hogs out in the swamps and then go get a hog and stuff. Yeah, so there's a number of instances of them stealing people's deer and things, and they do that kind of thing, you know, when people out hunting and fishing. I've heard of them stealing people's fish before too, actually.
Yeah, which isn't too far off. You know, a lot of people, they look at that and go, well, I don't know about that. But, you know, in Yellowstone, in different parts of the country, grizzly bears will follow hunters in. And they know that for a fact because they have them tracked with the GPS. And they'll follow hunters, wait for the gunfire to go off, then they'll go and take the kill. So, I mean, it's not too far off for a predator to, if they have to work less for the meal. Most predators really want to work less for the meal. They'd prefer not to chase something down. Less calories, less, you know, any predator really. If there's an easy target, they'll take it as opposed to working for it.
Yeah, I think birds do that, or some types of birds do that with wolves and things. They kind of follow them, you know, anticipating. Yeah, anyway, that was probably about the weirdest night of my life I ever had.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's about the weirdest night of my life.
Did you ever go out fishing again, or did it ever cross your mind the next time you went out fishing, or the next time you went out camping, or the next time you went out in the woods? Did you ever stop and go, God, should I be doing this? Or how did it change your outlook on the woods?
Not at all. Actually, I went back, like I said, I went back alone to that next place the next day, and I was actually calling out to the thing. I was yelling, saying, you know, here I am and stuff like that. When I went to see how tall it was, there was no one there at all when I went back that next day during daylight. And actually, you know, I was a Scoutmaster Boy Scout troop, and I took my Boy Scouts camping there. Did have a weird incident when I was camping there one time. Only time I've ever been in the woods and a tree fell over. had a tree fall over close to our camp. It went snap, and it was already dead tree though, so it could have just been its time. I don't know, but it made a big loud snap, and then it fell over. It was probably about 40 feet from our tents. Yeah, I took my Boy Scouts camping there. I went fishing there for years after that. I was carried a shotgun with me a lot after that. Not mostly with Sasquatches because it's so snaky down there. They got cottonmouths and stuff. And sometimes I'd shoot them skimming across the water and stuff. Anyway, but it didn't change me as far as going out in the woods, and I still do. And I actually do some research up in Oregon. I got a habitation zone I go to and to research and it's a pretty active zone up there too, and I've had some experiences up there. So no, it hasn't deterred me from going into the woods. It's I don't think I'm someone who scares all that easily, actually. So
yeah, I hear you. You know, what worries me about your encounter is, you know, the fish. It may have been looking at the fish for food. I think sometimes in desperate situations, these things look at people as food. You know, like anything else, any other predator. Is a cougar going to attack you every time you go out? Probably not. If a cougar is desperate, will it come after you or a small child? Absolutely. Same thing with a bear. 99% of the time, a bear will leave you alone. But if the bear's desperate, it will come after you, and it will look at you as food. You know, and the situation you're talking about, Nobby, with the fish, it's when they turn on you and they look at you as the food. They look at you as the fish and the easy target. That's what worries me, you know, and sometimes in these situations, it's a fascinating encounter, though. I really do appreciate you sharing. I know you were kind of iffy on coming on and sharing it, but it's probably one of the best encounters I think I've heard in a while.
Yeah, well, this one, he could have killed me anytime he wanted to at the wall. He was right there at me, and he never actually physically touched me when I was at the retaining wall. And I think some are more dangerous than others. This particular one, he did this harassment and aggressive nature and all, but and actually, I could have got killed if he'd really hit me in the head good with a rock. You can die for something like that, but Yeah, I think it depends on the individual Sasquatches, and like you say, how hungry are they, what kind of needs they have, and maybe even their cultural environment they grow up in. You know, if there's, who knows. But I came away with it, and I still think now that they're really, really intelligent. That's it was like dealing with another man when I was there. It was really, it's not like it's the smartest thing out in the wilderness there is besides humans. Really, it's only.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I don't think that they're stupid by any means, but in the same breath, I don't think cougars are stupid either. I think with these things, they're definitely, they're definitely smart enough to. Well, look, we can barely get one on camera nowadays. Barely get one. Hardly anyone can shoot one.
Well, Wes, that's kind of an important thing to. He was so intent. I mean, he would come up to my back really close, but then he didn't want to be seen. Even when I was retaining wall, he was doing his screams, but he was trying to stay out of my physical view. And he realized I couldn't see. I believe they could see in the dark really well, but I think he could realize that I couldn't see him in the dark, really. Except for that one time he was standing in full view, kind of with his whole torso was above all the bushes and all in his head. And I was at the wall, and I kind of picked him out. When he realized I was looking at him, then he turned and walked away. They have that funny nature about them where they go to extremes not to be seen.
It's very odd. Let me ask you, Nobby, and if you don't want to answer, I hate to put you on the spot. You don't have to answer. You can just say, I don't want to answer.
I don't want to answer. Go ahead.
How do you feel about one being shot?
Well, I've had different feelings on that. I really, myself, I don't want to shoot one. I don't think I would shoot one. But on the other hand, with all the skeptics and all out there, I think we really need to get a species. I don't think you can catch the thing. I really don't. I think it's difficult to get a body. I think they take charge of the remains and haul them away and bury them and things, and I kind of wonder which I hate to say this, even the government is thwarting us getting, good evidence, when they can. I hate to say that, but anyway, my feeling is I won't get too upset if someone shoots one and gets a body, actually. On the other hand, I kind of hate to think of because I do think of them as like another a primitive species of man, really. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it. If one gets shot and it gets proven, okay, I'll go for that. But myself, I'm not seeking to try to go shoot one. So if that makes sense.
And I understand that. It's funny. I posted the video of me and my brothers out, and we actually took a shot. And, good, bad, ugly. I'll show the audience what we did. Am I proud of everything? No. Am I kind of embarrassed of some of the things we did? Yeah, I am. But, I'm not going to change the story or try and present myself in a different light for the audience. But at the end of the day, I really think one needs to be shot. As heartless as it sounds, you listen to your encounter, Nobby, and it would be a shame to shoot that thing. I mean, as much as scary as it is, and as much as he was trying to intimidate you, like you said, if he wanted you, he could have snapped your neck and taken those fishes. And he didn't. He really didn't. He was wanting you to run off and probably leave the fishes. But it's a shame that at the end of the day, that's what has to be done, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I could be morally wrong, and I'm sure a lot of people think I'm a scumbag for saying it, but I think at the end of the day, that's what honestly needs to happen. But I guess that's neither here nor there. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing it. Like I said, it's probably one of the best encounters. And I want to give you a quick shout out, Nobby. I want to thank you for moderating the forums. For all the people out there, all the members on SasquatchChronicles.com, the main reason why the forums continue to be a safe place for people to share, safe place for people to collaborate, is because of Nobby. He's one of the main guys in there. And a lot of people maybe don't like him because he's a police of the forums, but at the end of the day, if he wasn't there, that place, I would be shutting the forums down if Nobby wasn't there. Honestly, I'd be shutting them down because you hope that people act like adults at the end of the day, but they don't. And you're there and you do it in a nice way, and you try and keep everyone cool in the forums. You try to keep it just a real cool place for people to share. And so I wanted to say that, Nobby, because I really do thank you for, if people enjoy the forums, they enjoy going in there, one of the main reasons why the forums are still up is because of Nobby and because of the time he takes to go in there and keep the forums going. So thank you for that very much.
Okay, thanks, Wes.
And I want to thank you for sharing your encounter very much, man. Thank you for coming on. I know you were kind of iffy on coming on, and I hope it was painless, but thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing.
Well, sure. Well, I'm glad I did.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter and you've been thinking about emailing me, shoot me an email. Let me read your encounter. I'd love to talk with you. I'd love to have you on the show. It's Wes at SasquatchChronicles.com. Until next time, everyone, be safe, and I will see you guys back on Sunday. Have a great weekend.